All right, good evening, friends. We'll be continuing.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Good evening.
Well, it'll be Saturday.
No, you're going to come too. You come too. Aren't you going to come? Yes, you are. You always.
Yeah.
Of course you are. Be with you. No. Okay.
What's
Anyway.
this problem here?
Yeah.
How come it didn't record? You. Oh,
Okay.
okay. He's talking to everybody. Nobody has their voice on. Everybody's. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to mute everyone so that we don't hear the background noise. But if you have a question, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask. We were actually just learning the last time about the laws of asking questions in Torah study. We'll continue with our examination of the laws of Torah study, although I think we moving on. So we started chapter 5, but I think we'll restart chapter 5. In chapter 5, we're moving from the question of the proper way to study Torah and the interactions between teacher and student that we looked at in previous chapters. And now we're moving to the mitzvah of honoring the sages, right? Of the teachers of Torah, the mitzvah of the kibud chachamim, right? That the people who are the keepers of our tradition, our Talmidei Chachamim, are to be honored. And this is in the same way that Hashem has commanded us to honor our parents. We're to honor those who are Torah teachers. And of course, that shouldn't be surprising, because we remember at a certain point we learned the idea that a person who teaches Torah to someone who's not their child becomes as if they're their parent. And the reason that is because the primary mitzvah of teaching Torah is V'shinantam levanecha. You should teach them to your children. And so because the mitzvah of teaching Torah is essentially teaching to one's children, so therefore teaching Torah to anybody is like teaching to one's extended children, and therefore the mitzvah of honoring the teachers of Torah is not so different. It's an extension, perhaps, of the mitzvah of kibud aveim, of honoring our parents, right? Because we're to honor those who give us the life of this world, and those who give us the life of the world to come, which we understand is Torah. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay, now I think we did a few of these halachot, but we'll go through them quickly. Just as a person is commanded to honor his father and hold him in awe, right? Those are two different mitzvot. We have a mitzvah of kibud aveim and a mitzvah of yira aveim, to be in awe or have fear of, right? That we read at the beginning of Parshat Kedoshim. I think the very first thing in Parshat Kedoshim is Ish aviv imo aviv tiro, and therefore we see that in Yira, the mother comes before the father, and in kibud aveim, the father comes before the mother. So there's all kinds of things that people have written about that and why that should be. But the sense of it is nevertheless that honoring our parents and being in awe of our parents are two mitzvot, and that those same mitzvot should be applied to Talmidei Chachamim, the people who are their teachers of Torah. And it's specifically your teachers of Torah. There's a difference here, this is very important. There's a difference here between people who are your teachers and people who are just are general teachers of Torah. And that's a remarkable thing that the Torah is telling us, that the people who teach me Torah, that I have had direct interaction with, I have this mitzvah in a way that even if someone who's a great teacher in Am Yisrael who could be even a Gadol Hador, right? One of the greatest teachers of our generation. If I don't have a connection to them, it's not quite the same, right? That the sense of personal attachment is really important here, because if they're teaching you Torah, then it's as if the one who's taught you has become your parent. Whereas someone who's sort of the parent of all of Am Yisrael, you may not have that personal connection to. And now there's still going to be a mitzvah to honor someone who's a great teacher and respected as a leader of the generation. But the level of personal attachment, such that you're going to have to treat them uniquely and differently, isn't there if they're not your teacher. We see this even more pronounced in the laws of mourning. People, not many people don't know this, but on the day that if it's your primary, your Rebbe, right, your primary Torah teacher dies, you sit Shiva for one day, in the same way that someone who's in their family sits Shiva. Now, for family members, it's 7 days, and for your Rav is 1 day. But that's something that many people don't know, that we have this familial connection to our teacher. I think I mentioned when my sort of the Rebbe of my youth, who was my teacher when I was young, her name was Malka. And when she passed, I said this in front of the congregation. It's so true that one of the things that I really learned from her is you can't really teach Torah authentically to someone without loving them. If you're going to really teach somebody, there needs to be a sense of care, an investment in the person, and not just an investment in my own ideas that I'm trying to propagate. Right? If I'm teaching Torah in a way which is about, look how wise I am. So there's something that's going to be, it's not going to sink in, it's not going to sink in the same way as if I'm teaching you Torah, because look how much Hashem cares for you, and that message of care is so important. I've also have Baruch Hashem, when I was in Israel, I got to meet many people who are highly touted and respected Torah scholars. And yet, when I have a question that is sort of sitting deep in my heart, I don't go to the biggest Torah scholar I can call, right? You don't necessarily want to climb the tallest, ladder when it's a personal question. I've often felt that my personal rabbi that I go to with my questions is my rabbi, because I know he loves me, because I know he cares about me, because he's been with me and guided me in thick and thin. And that personal attachment is so real, so I think that here the Rambam is telling us that the sense of the relationship that you have to your father should be one which is sort of almost parental, because it's the mitzvah of Kibbud Avayim carries over to the mitzvah of the Torah, the Torah's teacher. Okay. So indeed, the measure of honor and awe due to one's teacher exceeds that due to one's father, because his father brings him into the life of this world, while his teacher teaches him wisdom, teaches him Torah, brings him into the life of the world to come. Accordingly, if you saw a lost object belonging to your father and one belonging to your teacher, and the lost object belonging to your teacher takes precedence, right? That when you're in a situation where you have to sort of make a choice of which mitzvah are you going to do, so there we see that your teacher takes precedence, because of the sense of they're teaching you Torah, they're going to teach you the life of the world to come. Similarly, if his father and his teacher are both carrying loads, he should relieve his teacher's load and then his father's. We have a mitzvah in the Torah that when you see somebody carrying a heavy burden, that they're sort of unable to stumble with it, it's a mitzvah d'oraita to come and help them to unload them. And to help them. And the same is true even if it's on their animal, right? If their animal is carrying a burden that's too heavy for the animal, so you have a similar mitzvah to come in and help the person. So they say we have two people that need helping at the same time. That we're to prioritize our teacher. If his father and his teacher are held as captives, he should redeem his teacher and afterwards redeem his father. However, if his father is also a Torah sage, he should redeem his father first. The sense of, even if he's not your primary Rebbe, the fact that he is a Torah scholar, so he's sort of that makes him the double whammy, right? That he's both your father and a Torah scholar, so you can do both. Similarly, if his father is a Torah sage, even he's not equivalent to his teacher, he should return his lost article and then belonging to his teacher, right? Then we're going to prioritize the father if he's both a Torah sage, because then you're honoring the Torah and you're honoring your father. And this is a strange and almost controversial thing. There's no greater honor than that due to a teacher, and no greater awe than due to a teacher. The sages of Torah, your fear of your teacher should be equivalent to your fear of heaven. Sense of someone who's going to be teaching Torah is a representative of God, and the way that you hold and esteem the person, so it shows the esteem that you have for the teacher's teacher, right? The sense of God is our ultimate teacher, and that all the Torah that we're going to be learning, right, is coming from Hashem. And so someone who's giving us Torah, and similar, also our Father, right? The one who gives us life, and our father and our mother who give us life. Where did they get it from to give to us, right? They got it also from Hashem. Right? That's for example why when we're looking at the Ten Commandments, right? The first of the two tablets, generally we understand it to be the one that is between people and God, right? You have knowing Hashem and not doing idolatry, not taking God's name in vain. Honoring, remembering Shabbos to keep it holy, and then honoring your parents. So the first four clearly are between people and Hashem. So then why not the last? Right? As I said, the answer that usually is given is that no, don't make the mistake of thinking that the mitzvah of honoring your parents is a mitzvah between people and people. It's not a ben adam l'chavero mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that's Hashem gave you your parents. Hashem is exactly the right parents to give to the right children, and the sense of having that clarity and respect for our parents and honor that we're due to them is part of how we honor Hashem. It's not in the world of between people. And the second tablet we generally look at as between people, right? Don't kill, don't steal, adultery, bearing false witness, and coveting thy neighbor's stuff. So all of those are sort of in between people, and yet honoring your parents goes on the first one. So why is this controversial? There's no greater honor than that due to a teacher. The problem at Nebuch is that some people haven't had good teachers. And when you have it be when it becomes a form, right? That the point is. You have to honor your teacher. It becomes a matter of discipline, and it becomes enforced. You have to do this, and it ends up being you have so many people who have had frustration with this teacher or that teacher, especially in a Jewish context, which it can tarnish their entire relationship to Torah, with having a bad teacher. And so it's not easy for a person, especially a child or a teenager, to be able to say, I love the Torah, and this guy, is a bad representative, or this person that was teaching me wasn't doing it right. It's very, very difficult to have that clarity, to be able to say, no, I think that the teacher was the problem. And so when you have someone who's snuffing out a child's creativity, or showing them, not showing them the love, right, that the Torah is trying to communicate, it becomes very difficult, because then the honor of the Torah becomes a chore, becomes a duty, it becomes a crushing of the soul, of trying to break the spirit of the child, rather than trying to illuminate the spirit of the child. And so many different situations when teachers and institutions of education are not really doing, they're not doing as good. Look, it's very difficult to be a teacher. I'm not coming down on teachers, but I'm saying that a lot of people have had a difficulty here, and that this, your respect for me is your respect for God. That people get it in the wrong direction, right? That they have to be respectful, and instead of it being a communication of love and of care and of investment, it's a communication of suppression, and that's terrible. We're coming up to Shavuot. I don't know, the mitzvah of not mixing meat and milk. Right? What does this have to do with Shavuot? Well, on Shavuot, one of the reasons we have dairy. Shavuot, we say, is the time when God judges us for the fruits of the tree. Right? We have different times of the year where our different crops are sort of judged. Right? Pesach, let's say we're going to have our judgment of how much grain we're going to be able to make this year. And how much is it going to rain? We're judged on Sukkot, and how much in general is going to be our allotment of money that we get judged for on Rosh Hashanah. So they say that the Shavuot is the time that we get judged for the fruits of the tree. And that's appropriate because we bring, one of the things that we would do in the Beit HaMikdash on Shavuot was bring the first fruits of our orchard. Right, you would go out in the early spring, right, when things were starting to flower, and you would go and look in your orchard, and any time that you see the first fruit of every tree, I go to my apple tree, and I see this is the first fruit beginning to form. I tie a little ribbon around that bud, and then when it comes time to harvest, I pick go through and I pick all the apples with buds on them, with the ribbons on them, and the same with every single tree. I say this is the first fruit of this tree for this year. And I take them and I bring them to Yerushalayim and I present them before God on Shavuot. And it's called the Yom HaBikurim, the day of the first fruits. And 3 times in the Torah, when it brings the mitzvah of not eating meat and milk, it's part of the very same verse as the mitzvah of the first fruits. All right, it says, Reishit Bikurei Admatcha Tevi Beis Hashem Elokecha. And lots of us. Let's see if I can pull it up. Okay, 3 times it says, I'll find it here. 3 times in the Torah it tells us to bring the first fruits of our tree, Reshit Bikurei Admatcha, right? The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of Hashem your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And there's 3 times that it says this in the Torah, and it's the same 2 mitzvot paired each time. So what's that about? So I think the sense of Shavuot is when we're getting the new Torah for the year, right? What new Torah is going to come into the world? We say Zman Matan Torahenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. So the fruits of the tree, it's not the fruits of the trees. It doesn't, right? It says the fruits of the tree. So what's the tree? Is the Torah. And one of the fruits of the Torah is our new insights, our new ideas that each person is going to have their insights into the Torah. What new insights are you going to personally have? And what it's telling us here is that all of those new fruits, all those first fruits, the impulses, the creative fruits of each person's Torah learning need to be cherished and brought to God, and not to cook the kid in its mother's milk. And when you have a person who's the educational institution, which is there to teach them Torah, to nourish them, the Torah is mother's milk, but they get, instead of being cherished and having their creativity celebrated, they're suppressed, and that's cooking the kid in its mother's milk. I think that the sense of a person when they're not being taught in a way that nourishes their soul and empowers them to learn Torah and empowers them to enjoy learning Torah and to celebrate their own insights. So you're cooking the kid in its mother's milk. It's supposed to be mother's milk, and instead you're cooking the kid. And the Shavuot, therefore, is the day when we eat dairy, as if to show that we're not doing that, right? That we are celebrating the first fruits, we're bringing them to the temple, and that all of the Torah insights that each person is going to have should be celebrated. So here, that when the honor that's due to a teacher should not be in contrast to the honor due to myself, right? It should not be that I have to debase myself and lose my self-esteem in order to honor my teacher. That's not a good teacher if honoring the teacher requires a debasing of my or a lack of my own self-esteem. Quite the contrary, right? That a good teacher will help a person to hold himself, to higher. And the esteem that is due to a teacher who brings that out and brings out the best in each person. That, I think, is what is saying that's really something worth honoring. And so we shouldn't take this as a statement of mandatory comportment in Torah classes. You must behave yourself. Rather, it's really about the cultivation of a culture of esteem for Torah, esteem for your own Torah, and therefore esteem also for the people who are inspiring that creativity. Okay, therefore they say whoever disputes the authority of his teacher is considered as if he revolts against the divine presence, as is implied by numbers who let a revolt against God. Right here, we're talking about Korach. We'll read about Korach in a few weeks. Korach was Moshe's, I guess his uncle, maybe something like that. And according to the laws of the firstborn and the laws of inheritance, Korach should have been the leader of the tribe of Levi. He should have been the head honcho instead of Aaron, right? Because Aaron, their father, Moshe and Aaron's father Amram, was the younger brother of Korach's father, right? So Korach, right, should have been the elder. He should have been the one who received the honor. And so he took issue with Moshe. But there, when it's describing his rebellion against Moshe, it describes that he rebelled against God. He didn't rebel against Moshe. He rebelled against God. So the sense of if you dispute the legitimacy of the Torah in a way in which is public and inappropriate, so they say it's as if you rebel against God. And again, I think it's important that we draw a distinction between, there's a room for machloket in Torah. Torah has always had multiple opinions. Right? There's always been times, and there are many, many mishnayot in which we have, one mishnah is a record of two opinions, right? Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. And there are many mishnayot where we have people in different generations, where Rabbi Akiva, his opinion is presented as is Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Meir is a student of Rabbi Akiva. So it's not saying that there can't be multiplicity of opinion here, but it's a question of when you challenge the authority of Torah, not the authority of this particular person or the opinion of this person, but the general authority of Torah, then it's considered a rebel against God. Whoever engages in controversy with his teacher is considered as being engaged in controversy with the divine presence, as is implied where the Jews contested with God and where he was sanctified. Also Meriva, right? In the sense of Meriva, power struggle. You hear sometimes, and certainly in more modern academic circles, the idea that the various generations of rabbis or of prophets or of priests to this, we're always trying to gain power, and that the various things in the Torah, this and that and the other thing, because the academics don't believe in the divine, right, the divine source or authority of the Torah, authorship of the Torah. But they see, look, the fact that they were here, they point to something in the Torah saying that the people in that generation were trying to claim power for themselves, and that that's the way that they sort of see things. I think that that's so sad that people are reduced to that kind of thinking. When it becomes a power struggle, between different things, and it becomes a question of who wants power, you've missed the point. The divine presence of the Torah is gone when it becomes who's in charge, me or you, right? Then when we've made the Torah into something which is our learning Torah is not about Torah, and it's not about Hashem. It's about who gets to make the decisions, and who gets to make this, and who empowerment, and all the different things. That's when we take our worldly stuff and we sort of project it onto the Torah instead of taking the Torah and elevating our worldly things. So I think it's very what he's saying here, right? In the sense of controversy means power struggle. Whether you're trying to say, no, you don't get to make these decisions. We get to make these decisions. A pity. Okay, whoever complains against his teacher is considered to be complains against the divine presence, as implied by your complaints are not against us, but against God. Again, the sense, we're not saying complaining in the sense of I didn't like the way he spoke to me, so I'm going to challenge him. It's perfectly appropriate that a person who feels slighted by their teacher should have a conversation with them about it, and say, if there's an issue that you'd like to discuss with me, I'm here. You don't have to, do it. But the sense of when it's talking here about complaining, mitra'im is the word here, right? So mitra'im, the word, the source, here is resh ayin mem, is the word for thunder, right? Thunder. So the point is, what you're doing here, you're making thunder. You're making a lot of noise, right? What you're trying to do here is sense of cancel, right? Cancel is a good word here. When you're trying to cancel your Torah teacher, if there's things which are inappropriate that somebody's doing, being a Torah teacher doesn't excuse you from inappropriate, right? From being taken to task for inappropriate behavior. But again, the sense is when you're making this about power struggle and who's in charge, then you miss the point, right? Then it's no longer about Torah. And so that's what it's saying, that to take a person, to take their power struggle, their desire for leadership of the community, they want to spoil somebody's reputation, they want to cancel them, that it's considered particularly violent to do against the Torah sage. That when you're doing that wrongly, right? When you're wrongly using accusations in order to depose someone, whether you have a personal grudge with them, or that person you want to replace them with your nephew in the same job, whatever the issue is, right? It's totally inappropriate to take those personal grievances and personal strife and put it on the Torah. Right? That we don't want to besmirch the name of the Torah. And when there's individuals involved whose behavior is problematic, that needs to be separated from the Torah in a certain way. Again, these several paragraphs are often quoted when people are trying to cover up scandalous behavior. Right? That this is say, look, you're complaining about the rabbi. That's is what the Rambam's talking about. You're like complaining against God. That should not be. My sense is that that's not the point here either. And we should not be learning this Rambam as ammunition to help people get away with things that they shouldn't get away with. And that's certainly not the implication here either. Whoever thinks disparagingly of his teacher is considered to be taught disparagingly of the divine presence, as implied by numbers, and the people spoke out against God and Moses. Another thing, how sad that a person would have all of these complaints and still consider the person their teacher. Go find another teacher. What I mean? If the Torah is something that's precious to you, and you want Torah to be good, and you have a sense of desire, and you find that the particular teacher is not to your liking, especially in today's world, there are many, many teachers in many different places, and there's vast resources online and in other ways, and a person shouldn't be feel that they're stuck with a particular person teaching them. That there's enough Torah accessible today that if you see that there's something that's wrong with a teacher, or that you're having a difficult time, or that this particular teacher or their style of teaching is suppressing your creativity, so there's nothing that says you have to be attached to them. And the fact that you would still be sort of fixated on that teacher is perhaps part of the problem. Okay, so here's now what the Rambam's going to tell us. What is meant by disputing the authority of one teacher? What does he really mean here? A person who establishes a house of study where he sits, explains and teaches without his teacher permission in his teacher's lifetime. This applies even when his teacher is in another country. Meaning, if you're going to go and you're going to start your own base medrash, you're going to start your own new Hasidic sect without the permission of your teacher, without the blessing of your teacher. So it's as if you're saying, I'm not with him anymore. Right? So there's an affront to that. And that's considered problematic. There's also a very long history of people doing this. There's a long history of people who left the Rebbe and gone and started their own thing. There was a whole line in Chassidut, right, that Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk left the Maggid of Mezrich. The Chayzer of Lublin left Rabbi Elimelech. The Yiddish Kodesh of Shist left the Chayzer. Right, Simcha Bunim left the Yiddish Kodesh. The Kotzker left Simcha Bunim. The Ishbitzer left the Kotzker. And so generation after generation after generation, there was this kind of leaving one's teacher to think that they can do better in that particular line. And then it came down to the Beis Yaakov, who's the son of the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and he didn't do it. He stayed where he was. He didn't start his own sect. He said, "What are you doing? Didn't you?" He said, "No, I followed in the tradition of my father of rebelling, so I rebelled against his tradition of rebelling, so I stayed." And that was his rebellion. But the sense of that this is something that when there is a new angle of Torah, right? When Torah is evolving and people are not keeping up, perhaps there's room for this, perhaps. But nevertheless, this is something that people took very seriously, and that a person should receive the blessing and the encouragement of their teacher before going up and opening up shop. Right. This is why today when we get smicha, today's smicha, right, is not really the same thing as it used to be. Right. When Rabbi Akiva says that he gave his students smicha, right, that he sort of bestowed upon them the title of Rebbe, that had been an unbroken chain since Moshe Rabbeinu. Today that chain is not so unbroken, and there are many halachot which we're not allowed to rule on today, because we don't have that unbroken chain. So for example, even if we were to have a high court in Yerushalayim, because we don't have the unbroken chain of transmission, we could not execute somebody. Right? The execution of someone for a capital crime requires that we have judges who have this unbroken chain of transmission. There is a way to restart the chain, so we're not completely out of luck, right? There is a way to restart the chain, and that's maybe we'll get to that one day in the laws of kings and the Sanhedrin. Okay, it's forbidden to ever render a halachic judgment in one's teacher's presence. Whoever renders a halachic judgment in his teacher's presence is worthy of death. The sense of when the teacher's there and you sort of up and superimpose, that this is again considered very chutzpahdik, right? That should not be something that a person, when your teacher is there, you should let them decide. Okay, if a person asked a student regarding a halakhic question, and there were 12 mil between him and his teacher, 12 miles, right? That's in our day, that's not so far. We have cars and whatnot. When you're riding a camel, it takes a longer time. He's permitted to answer, right? The sense of it's not, we didn't have cell phones, etc. Right now, today you can ask halakhic questions. There's hotlines, right? That you can just send a text message. You just send an SMS with a halakhic question, and they'll text you back. So here they didn't have that, and so the sense is that if your teacher's not immediately accessible, so then you have to, and it's appropriate to answer a question. But to prevent transgression, it's permitted to give a halakhic judgment even in the presence of one's teacher. Meaning, if there's something immediately that needs to be addressed to prevent someone from falling into transgression, so the immediacy of the need is a priority. But when does this apply? What does this apply? For example, one saw a person perform a forbidden act because he was unaware of the prohibition, or because of his perversity. He should try to prevent it by telling him this is forbidden, right? You don't have to be the rabbi to be able to say, hey, the tefillin's off center, or something of that side, right? When you're dealing with something which is not an obvious, but is an easily correctable thing, right? So it's not the same as, you don't have to make a decision. It's not that we're asking for a new halachic decision. This applies even if his teacher is present, even though one's teacher had not given him permission. Wherever the desecration of God's name is involved, no deference is paid to teacher's honor, right? When it's an issue of protecting God's reputation, you just do what you need to do. When does this apply? With regard to a matter that came up incidentally. But it happened to be that way. We're not talking about establishing policy. However, establishing oneself as a halachic authority to sit and reply to all who concern asking halachic matters is forbidden, even if the student is at one end of the world and teaches the other, until either the teacher dies or the student receives permission from the teacher. So this permission from the teacher, this is what we have. This is what we have today as our smicha, right? If I show you my document, my smicha document, and you can see Rabbi Rosenblatt's. It's a different kind of thing. What it says is yore, meaning he could translate that as he's allowed to rule, right? Or his ruling is a ruling, right? Or his ruling stands. In the sense of we're being authorized by our teacher to go and give halachic decision, right? So this is the essence of what we have today as smicha, right? So when I'm Rabbi Riskin gave me smicha, and several others are signed on it. The sense is that I have their permission and their blessing to go and function as a rabbi and to teach Torah. That this is the source that we need it, right? The sense of if you don't have the permission, so you're not supposed to do that. There's another side of the equation, right? And that's what it says in Pirkei Avot. It says b'makom she'eni shamti tzadeh li'ov ish, in a place where there's no man or there's no leader, there you should try to be a leader. Meaning, when there's no one to teach, what are you going to do? Not teach? In the sense of the need for Torah is perhaps more important, but nevertheless, there's always this concern that a person should not be seen as taking up office, right, without the permission or blessing of their teacher. So today, when we get a smicha, this is what it means: that the student receives permission from their teacher to go and teach. Not everyone whose teacher dies is permitted to sit and render judgment concerning Torah law. Only one whose student is worthy of rendering judgment. Right? Just because your teacher died doesn't mean that now you're the next guy. You still need to know your stuff. Now, this tangentially, this chapter and this next piece coming is very, very hot. A couple of years back, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a case of Orthodox women being ordained as rabbis, and then the OU had to come out with a statement where they said that, as a matter of policy, we believe that women can offer teaching and can be teachers of Torah, but we don't want to confer the title of rabbi on a woman. And this was a matter of controversy. Like, well, why not? What is that? What's the difference between someone who's teaching and someone who's ruling in halakha? Right? When you come to me for a halachic decision, most of the time, I'm not going to be making something up. I'm not going to have to come up with a new idea, right? You ask me a simple question, I'll probably give you an answer that's in the Shulchan Aruch, or maybe the Rambam. I'll give you a well-established answer that is not. I'm not the authority behind it. So in that way, am I deciding the halacha, or am I being a teacher of Torah? At that point, really, I'm just being a teacher. I'm telling you the Rambam says X, right? And I'm leaving it on the Rambam's authority. I'll tell you the Shulchan Aruch wrote, that this is the thing. So in that way, I'm not really deciding the halacha for you. I'm just telling you what's already been said. So that they said a woman can do, right? And when it comes to a new idea, like for example, a new technology which has been developed, right? The famous example, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein wrote bazillions of tshuvot dealing with new things. Right, I remember reading the first tshuva that ever mentions a microwave. And the question of how should we deal with a microwave halachically? Does it count as cooking? Does it? Okay, so all of these things were There needs to be, but when you're dealing with a new technology, so the person who makes that ruling, they're actually making a halakhic ruling on their own authority. That's not the same as quoting the Shulchan Aruch, right? And that requires the sort of this kind of authority, this permission, right? That a person there is doing, and that's what they wanted to. They felt uncomfortable conferring that authority, that title, to a woman because of some certain sources, that say that the woman shouldn't hold a position of authority, and so it's all sort of tangential. But for the most part, they didn't want to tell us that women can't teach Torah. So, for example, you have the halachic advisor, right? Yoetz Halacha program that Nishmat is running, that Rabbanit Cohen is just finishing that. We'll have that certification. That's a very, very serious course of study in which those women are not being authorized to issue new rulings. They're being taught to tell you what it says in the Shulchan Aruch, right? And so the OU is okay with that because that's a teacher of Torah and not a decider of halacha. And so that becomes a very fine point, but you'll see that that becomes important. Okay. So any student who's not worthy of rendering halachic judgments and does so is foolish, wicked, and arrogant. As it says in Proverbs, she has cast down many corpses, applies to him. Right? That this is a person you're doing more damage than good. Conversely, a sage who is worthy of rendering halachic judgments and refrains from doing so, holds back the bread of Torah and places a stumbling block before the blind. How prodigious are those she slew? Meaning the sense of, if you really are the best guy around and you're not ready to teach, that's a bigger problem than if you're teaching, when you shouldn't be. This is a big idea, that which is worse, right? Which is worse, to hold back your Torah, or to give Torah when it's not fully right, And so here, I think the Rambam is quite clear that a person who has what to say and doesn't say it, and so that goes back to what I was saying about cooking the kid in its mother's milk. When person who knows a lot has ingrained in them that they're not worthy, that does more damage to the Torah, than a person being too confident. Now obviously we don't want that either, but which is worse? I think this is a very profound statement that he's making here. That withholding Torah is a greater stumbling block. And I think this is also appropriate for all of us to take to heart, right? That we may not have profound, new halachic rulings to issue, but even some idea that occurs to us that we should not hold it back from saying it over at the Shabbat table, right? If you're reading in Shul and you have some new idea that leaps out at you that you haven't heard anywhere, that nobody said, that's worth sharing, and you shouldn't, don't want to be guilty of holding back Torah from Israel. Again, we're not talking necessarily about halachic rulings, but every insight is precious. Okay, so these underdeveloped students who have not gathered much Torah knowledge seek to gain prestige in the eyes of common people and inhabitants of the city by jumping to sit at the head of all questions of law and halachic judgments in Israel. Right? Then that's unfortunately, that happens. Again, what a wondrous culture where the person who's going to be esteemed is the Torah scholar. Halavai that it should be that people who want esteem, are and want honor and want to be well thought of are seeking it in the Torah. That it's already a good thing, about our culture, but nevertheless, that's the wrong motivation. They spread division, destroy the world, extinguish the light of the Torah, and wreak havoc in the vineyard of the God of hosts. And as Wisdom Solomon alluded to them, as it says, take for us little foxes that spoil the vineyards. Our vineyards are blooming, right? So we don't want to also have this sense of too many people running around, being rebbes. this was part of the polemic against the Hasidim, right? That people saying, "Oh, look, now everybody's a Rebbe." You got Rebbes popping up in every shtetl. Everybody thinks they're the next big thing, and that the people should pump the brakes. So they're both true, right? That on the one hand, we don't want unripe fruit. We don't want we don't want those fruits that are being brought to the Kohen to be not ripe and not developed. But we also want that they shouldn't cook the kid in its mother's milk.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay, thanks. What's kind of the hierarchy of this? Like, let's say, there's the student, there's the teacher, and then perhaps there's the posek. And I don't really understand, which decisions would take precedent or how one defers to a posek. I'm not sure that.
Very good. Very good. So posek, just to make sure everybody understands, the word posek means is deciser or authority, but the word lifsok means to stop. Right. So the guy that puts an end to the conversation. Right. That's the posek is the one. That's the end of the line. Right. The buck stops there. And so the sense of when there's a, let's go like this. At the beginning, in Parshat Yitro, Jethro sees sees Moshe sitting in judgment from day until night, and he says, it's not good what you're doing. And instead, he says, but Moses' father-in-law saw how much he had to do for the people. He says, what is this thing that you're doing to the people? Why do you act alone while these people stand about you from morning till evening? He says, because they're coming to ask about the judgment of Hashem. He says, when they have a dispute, they come from me, and I decide between one party and another, and I make known the laws and teachings of God. This is how it does it, he says. So he says, no, don't do it like that. It's going to wear you out, and it's going to be too much for you. Listen to me. Let me tell you how God, God will be with you, and this is the best way to do it. Tell them all the laws. Teach them the Torah. Yeah. So that's the first level. As he started, they have to teach the law, teach the Torah. And then, that you shall seek out from among the people capable individuals who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain, and set these as the chief of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Right? And they will judge the people at all times and have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute between themselves and make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. Yeah, so that's where we get the idea of that we want as much as possible a decentralization of Torah. We don't want a central authority to be ruling on everything. But when it's a big deal, when it's a question which is creating controversy, which is creating split, which is creating machloket in the community, you need to be able to come to someone to settle it, right? And so that role of the when there's controversy, to be able to go to higher authorities, right, to appeal to higher authority is a very critical thing. And so we have, and ultimately that arrives at the Sanhedrin, and when the final issue is when the Sanhedrin votes and majority rules, and that can't be challenged, right? That's sort of the ultimate authority. Now we don't have that today. Right? We don't have a Sanhedrin, and we can't get to that single unified opinion, which has to be accepted by everybody. And instead, it sort of gets passed up the food chain to the biggest fish, and there are multiple food chains and multiple communities, and so certain communities will appeal to one person, and certain appeal to the other, and in a certain way, it's those chains of command which differentiate between streams, if you will, or tribes in today's world. For anyone in the modern Orthodox or the Yeshiva University world, which is going to include both Rabbi Rosenblatt and myself, right? That I didn't go to YU, but my teachers did, right? So When you go to Rabbi Willig today or Rabbi Reese, these are all people who are Rosh Yeshiva, and Dean, top, blue label people in the American, Yeshiva University crowd. So that's sort of the top shelf. And when if you need to get all the way to Rav Willig, very few people will argue, in today's world with Rav Willig, and the people that will refer to other Gedolei Hador, people like Rav Asher Weiss, who's in Yerushalayim. He's very much a representative of the very Haredi, right? The not so modern, the not modern Orthodox, the ultra Orthodox community. And there are many people for whom that's the top of the food chain. And there are others, and people when you're in a Hasidic sect of one type or another, so the Rebbe of that, so there are always sort of the chains of command. But because there's a preference for the decentralization, when you have a community which has the healthy enough respect for the authority of its rabbi, right? If there's a question that came up, Rabbi Rosenblatt has to deal with it. He comes, maybe he'll take advice from his teachers, right? But if he rules for our community and that's accepted in our community, we don't have to pass it up, right? That's good enough. And it's a sense of because it's accepted, that's where it's enough. And when there's constant turmoil and argument, that's when it needs to be passed up, to have somebody who's respected by both parties, right? Sort of settle the matter. Let me show you another place where this comes up in the Torah, because it really makes it clear when you see it the way that they wanted it. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Here. We're in Parshat Shoftim here. If a case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over a homicide, civil law, or assault, a matter of dispute in your courts, then you shall promptly repair to the place that Hashem your God will have chosen, and you'll come to the Levitical priest or the magistrate in charge at that time and present your problem. And when they have announced to you the verdict of the case, you shall carry out the verdict that is announced to you from the place which Hashem has chosen, observing scrupulously all their instructions to you. You shall act in accordance with the instructions given to you and the ruling handed down to you. And you must not deviate from the verdict that they announced to you, either to the right or to the left. Right? And furthermore, should either party to the dispute act presumptuously and disregard the priest who's charged at serving serving Hashem or the magistrate, the party shall die. You shall sweep out evil from Israel. Right there, you have. This is where we get the sense if the Sanhedrin has ruled, and a person, publicly teaches otherwise, right, that's a capital crime. Right? The sense of then you're undermining the authority of the Torah. So here you see that it's about when something is too big for you, and the measurement of when it's too big is because it's making controversies, making quarrels in our gate, right? And so the need to invoke higher authority is because of this ongoing controversy. And this is not only in matters of big deal. When you have any kind of civil dispute, right? I lent you this, he got hurt, blah, blah, blah. The first step is before we go to a Beis Din and try and work it out according to the Torah, if we can come to an amicable, solution, right? If we can settle out of court, as it were, that's preferable, right? And that the rabbis will try and achieve that settlement before going to trial, as it were. And there's a sense of appealing to higher authority is only necessary when there's things, and so when there's strife and controversy and disagreement, and people are unwilling to work things out. So in all these situations, if there's someone whose authority is respected and whose opinion is accepted in the community, that's enough, right? We don't always have to pitch things to the highest level in every matter. I think that's an important thing. Now, the other side of it, and this is something that Rabbi Rosenblatt and I have discussed a number of times, is there are moments when he suggests, or I said, that we go and we ask people. I wrote not so long ago. I wrote to Rabbi Reese, who's I know him from Chicago. He's the head of the CRC, but he's also the Av Beis Din of the Beis Din of America. So he's a top shelf. And so when there are matters which are difficult, so it's on me as a rabbi to ask. But if my authority will be accepted in my community, I'm not required to go over my own head, right? It's not, then the requirement is on me if I want to take Eitzah. I've got to get moving, get these kids to bed. There's fascinating stuff. Thank you for joining me. We'll continue in the Rambam again next week on Monday is Shavuos. It should be a good Shavuos for all of us. We should have our creativity peaked and stimulated, and we all have really good, ripe Chidushei Torah in the coming year.
Thank you, Rabbi Yoshiko.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.